There are 7 species of herbicide-resistant weeds in Nebraska: common water hemp, Palmer amaranth, kochia, shattercane, mare's tail, giant ragweed, and red root pigweed. Some of these have also shown resistance stacking or resistance to multiple herbicides. A new UNL Extension publication details the evolution of resistance and urges growers to use an integrated weed management program with a variety of control measures. UNL Extension Weed Management Specialist Amit Jhala talked with us earlier this week and gave us an update on resistance issues in the state.
So far we have 7 weed species that are resistant to at least one group of herbicides. Some of the weed species, for example common water hemp, that has been confirmed resistant to number of herbicides, for example 2,4-D, glyphosate, ALS chemistries. And out of 7 weed species, there are 6 weed species that are broadleaf weed species, and only 1 weed species that is grass weed species, and which is shattercane, that has been confirmed resistant to ALS group of herbicides.
How did this resistance develop in Nebraska?
It's just a simple concept of using the same herbicide or herbicide with the same mode of action, using continuously for many years, and that is how weeds are developing selection pressure, and at the end of the story they will be resistant to that particular herbicide that has been used continuously on the same field.
We hear a lot about using different modes of action. When someone says mode of action, what does that mean when they're talking about herbicides to control weeds?
Right, so each herbicide works differently. For example, glyphosate, that when you spray glyphosate on any weed species, it's more like it inhibits EPS-PS enzyme, and that is how the plant will die, by targeting that particular enzyme. So each herbicide works differently, and that is known as mode of action. What is the actual mechanism of action that inhibits the particular enzyme, and that is how it will kill the weed species. And the idea here to use multiple mode of action is because each herbicide, as I told you, works differently, so it is always better to use different herbicides that belongs to different mode of action, and that is the way to rotate your herbicide chemistries, and that might be useful to reduce the selection pressure on individual herbicide.
Tell me about the new release from Extension on herbicide-resistant weeds in Nebraska.
Right, so recently we have published a new extension circular about herbicide-resistant weeds in Nebraska, and it includes all the information about what is the status of herbicide-resistant weeds, what is mode of action of herbicides, and how they can be used for control of those weeds that are already resistant to certain herbicides. And it will also teach growers about how they can use different mode of action herbicides to make sure that they are not building any selection pressure on individual herbicide.
Explain to me what resistance stacking means in weed control.
Herbicide stacking means when a single weed species is resistant to more than one mode of action of herbicide. For example, common water hemp in Nebraska, now we have confirmed it is resistant to glyphosate as well as several other ALS group of herbicides. So when an individual weed species is resistant to more than one herbicide that belongs to different mode of action, that is known as stacked resistant, and that is more challenging because you are reducing your herbicide options to control that particular weed species.
You mentioned there were 7 species that are herbicide resistant in Nebraska. Are there any suspected of being resistant as well?
Right, so last year we have collected seeds from a field. It was a soybean field where glyphosate was used repeatedly, and we collected seeds of common ragweed that was not being controlled by repeated application of glyphosate, and right now we are investigating that particular common ragweed species, and maybe in future we will provide you some more update about level of resistance or whether it is resistant or not.
How important is this issue for Nebraska farmers? There might be some farmers who have these resistant weeds in their fields. There might be some that don't have these resistant weeds in their fields. But why is this important that they know either way?
It is important because we have been using glyphosate for last many years, and as a result of that, in Nebraska right now we have 4 weed species including mare's tail, giant ragweed, common water hemp and kochia that are resistant to glyphosate. So at some point, although the growers that think like we don't have any glyphosate resistant weed in my field, but still I would say this is important to know about some other herbicide mode of action or try to use some other method of weed control to make sure that they do not end up with having glyphosate resistant weed species in their field.
How hard could weed control in Nebraska be if growers don't change the way they try to manage these weeds?
It might be challenging, right? So I think this is the right time to think about different herbicide programs that might be more effective rather than relying on single herbicide.
Are there any new technologies available for managing resistant weeds in corn and soybeans?
Right, so there are some new technologies that might be commercialized in near future. For example, for last few years we have been testing dicamba resistant soybean, and that might be useful for control of glyphosate resistant weeds or any other herbicide resistant weeds that is not resistant to dicamba.
And in corn?
And also, yeah, 2,4-D resistant corn and soybeans that we are also testing for last few years, and that might be a good option. But again, if it will not be utilized in a sustainable manner, then we would end up with having multiple, or as we mentioned, stacked resistant weed species. So that new technology, once it will be commercialized, it should also used in an integrated approach with some other herbicides or with some other herbicide resistant crop species.
UNL Extension's new circular on herbicide-resistant weeds in Nebraska can be found through the Market Journal website. You can also learn more about controlling weeds at upcoming field days. On June 27th in Clay Center, UNL Extension will hold a weed management field day near the South Central Ag Lab. And on July 9th and 10th, there will be herbicide-resistant weed management field days in Fremont and Lincoln. Those 2 events are sponsored by UNL Extension and the Nebraska Soybean Board. More information on those field days can also be found on marketjournal.unl.edu.